Why women, especially mothers, should be invested in politics. Welcome to the January Donovan Show, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning in. The vision for us here in the Women's School is that we women can truly be a part of rebuilding culture, beginning with our own personal development. So today I want to talk about the importance of us having a voice in politics. So let's just look at our current landscape in politics right now. Our culture has become upside down. It's it's sort of this last 3 years after COVID. On a personal level, I've awakened to the fact that there is massive corruption that I was not really interested in knowing or didn't even think really kind of it existed. I grew up in the Philippines, and my understanding was that in America, there is justice and that there it is a place of no corruption because this is a place where you can actually have greater accountability. And I think that rug was pulled by under me this last 3 years. And I think it's not just me, it's us waking up to the fact that, our world has become so corrupt. And our country, our culture, media, Hollywood, politics have become so corrupt. And it's not just me, you're seeing it, where there is a obvious collusion between all the different industries, whether it's if the pharmaceutical industry or the government or Hollywood working together to dehumanize us. So I've been reflecting on this because I grew up with my father telling me, January, politics is dirty, you don't get into it. America has a perfect justice system, and that's why we're moving there. And I pulled myself, it was intentional about the fact that I'm like, I don't ever want to be part of sort of the political sphere. Providentially, after I graduated college, I worked on Capitol Hill because I was interested in women's studies. And I thought, well, maybe that's a place for me to learn more. So I got a taste of the political sphere, working almost 4 years in Capitol Hill as an executive assistant to a congressman. But I don't think I really saw the magnitude of the impact of politics in every part of our life. And so the last 3 years, I have shifted, I would say, my belief that this is mom stay home. This is us taking care of our children. This is us building a business. And this is sort of our life here with our family. And that's politics. Unfortunately, if we don't have a voice in politics and if we're not paying attention about the current events, eventually it's going to change our home life, our personal life, and the quality of our life. Exactly kind of what's happening right now. If you think about Hollywood, if you think about how so much of the policies that we are living currently of, got outside our school system, questioning the fact what is a man and a woman, what's happened in our education system where we have inappropriate books for our children. And honestly, I started to think of my own irresponsibility in the political sphere simply because I don't want to get in there. And I've been asleep for the past 20 years instead of, paying attention to the current events, understanding what's happening in our political sphere so I can influence, or not influence, I would say, influence my vote and study the landscape, because they're impacting the way I live my life. They're impacting the quality of my home life. So I think that a lot of times mothers are busy. We are busy trying to take care of our children. We are busy trying to take care of our families and protect them. And we have no time to engage in current events, study it, pay attention to it. And we kind of know a little bit about it, but we're not really deep into the process of trying to research on our own simply because of time, but more than anything, mental exhaustion. However, we don't honestly have a choice, because if our voices are not there, if good people are not influencing politics and we just leave it to a few, then it's risky, because then who is making the policies that are impacting the quality of our life? It doesn't mean you're running for office. It doesn't mean that you're out there campaigning. It just means that you're paying attention to the current events, how it's impacting your family life. There has to be a part of you where you're paying attention to the relevance of current events and connecting the dots and studying how it connects the dots. Because here's where I was awakened this past 3 years. So much of the policies impact the food that we eat and the junk in our food system. So if I am truly invested in providing quality, meals for my family, and here I am fighting a behemoth in, sort of the political sphere, that are actually allowing junk food and MSGs and crap chemicals in my food. And if I don't pay attention to that, if I don't actually, I'm not aware of it, I could be a victim of all the yucky stuff they put in my food because I'm not aware of it. If my children are in school and I'm not paying attention to what's happening in the current events and the policies, then I'm a victim to the fact that my kids could be reading stuff that are not actually good or in alignment with my values. I don't think we have a choice, given our current landscape, to not pay attention to current events and politics and leave that to other people because I'm not interested. Mothers' voices need to be in every facet of society. Women's voices need to be in every facet of society. I'm not saying that you're going and jumping in to do a campaign. I'm saying you've got to watch the news, not be obsessed with the news. You have to connect the dots. You have to do the homework on every part of your life, because otherwise we are just a victim to what everyone tells us we should do: media, policies, politics, everything, even our doctors. We become a victim to what they say. I just heard a stat yesterday from I'm going to find it if anybody wants it, but one of the most read peer-reviewed scientists came out with a study that most drug industry, or most drugs out there, are actually not effective, and that there's a whole pharmaceutical world that's colluding with our government to basically make people sick. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know. What I'm telling you is that sometimes it feels like we can't make a difference, our own little voice, because that's how I feel sometimes. I'm like, what's January Donovan going to do with all this crazy, political nonsense that's happening and the policies? How can I possibly influence? But I think us knowing and not becoming a victim is one huge major step. Number two, us doing our own homework to protect our family is massively important. Number three, you can influence your own children, you can influence your own friends and not become a victim. And that's what I want to invite women here is, we either can become enslaved by, the policies, or we can push back and do our own homework and be part of the solution by pushing back some of the things that are not helping us, whether it's our health, whether it's our what we're being taught, whether it's the fact that we can no longer define what it means to be a man and a woman. I mean, I remember listening to one of the commentators I was listening to is that, if you think this fight is not coming at your door, you're delusional. And it sort of never left me, because it's easy to keep politics at bay and just, we're reading the news, we're kind of seeing it at bay. It's not really kind of impacting us personally, but it actually is. And we're seeing that it's impacting us. It's impacting the fact that, I don't want my daughters to go in the same bathroom with another man. And that is right on my doorstep. I don't want my children to read inappropriate books that they're not ready for. So what's the take home point here? We have to just get out of our own victim mentality. I'm not saying that's you. I'm saying that it could be something that we could be tempted to do and say, life is hard, motherhood is hard, and it's overwhelming, and say, you know what, I just got to muster up. I just got to fight back. I just have to find the strength and keep going and growing. And I'm not going to just allow the fact that my lack of skill, my lack of training is going to make me not pay attention to things that are really important in our world today. Because what I want to invite women in is to pay attention to, media, to politics, connect the dots and how it impacts their children, their relationship, their personal development, and not have this isolated view that here's my family, I'm okay, I don't want to ruffle some feathers, because that's no longer sustainable. And here's why. I would say the last 50 years, we have been living that way. And women who are invested in taking care of their children have said, well, I just want to take care of my children. And we've got a few people who are kind of doing their own cause. But what we're seeing right now is a world that has been so corrupted because I think, excuse me, a lot of good people, to no fault of their own, including and primary myself, have lived with sort of this trust and in some ways naive about the corruption that's around us, that evil is actually everywhere. And that if you're not vigilant and we're not there fighting, then one day we're going to wake up in a world where it's unbearable to actually live, because not only is our freedom actually at stake, but being human is at stake. Our God-given freedom to be human, to be a woman, is actually at stake. So I think that this would also a good place for me to honor the men and women who have fought tirelessly in the front lines. A lot of people that are protecting, traditional values, protecting the right of an infant and a child, protecting, fighting the causes of, I would say, the values that are, I think, in harmony with the way we were created as human beings. Whether you're a man or woman of faith, I think natural law tells us that there's something so valuable about us human beings that we need to protect and keep sacred. And some of the most basic, I would say, standards is already gone. The standard of honesty. I mean, think about honesty. Just think, I'm like, the problem, what we have is that people are not honest. I'm like, we have all these policy problems, we have all this corruption, but where does that boil down to? One person or thousands of them living dishonestly that has mounted up to a massive corruption. What we need to do is to go back into the basic of what does it mean to be human, to be a woman of value, and focusing on, virtues of honesty, of integrity, of loyalty, of faithfulness, of kindness, of respect, and not bypass the most basic foundation building block of society, because everything that we're trying to solve on a massive scale, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's policies, whether it's the cultural war against women, can be boiled down to one individual responsibility in her own personal development. So he and she can actually develop her ability to actually have moral character. And this is why we can't afford not to pay attention to politics, to the current events, to what's happening in Hollywood, and not just leave that to other people to fight. We need to be vigilant, aware, because we cannot be asleep in the wheel. And more than, I would say, ever, we need to stand our ground, protect the value, what it means to be human, what it means to be a woman, and strategically, with respect, but don't back down. And the only way you do that is if you educate yourself on what's happening in the world, and don't make excuses that we have so many things to do, that life as a mom is hard, that we've lost sort of sight of what's happening in the world because we just want to kind of live in the comfort of our own cocoon, of our own family, and just focus on that. In some ways, that is a selfish way to live, because we're just protecting our own little world. Yes, we need to preserve it, but we can't just live just preserving our own little cocoon. And sometimes I get, I have these conversations with men, and I get kind of fiery about the fact that I'm like, well, we can't just let the world crumble in front of us. We need to fight back and push back, and we need to find our voices. And I get this pushback and say, excuse me, I'm still battling my cough here, and say, well, January, the best thing you can do is raise your family and raise great children. Absolutely accurate. But that's not enough. What if every woman just said, well, I'm just going to raise my family and make sure I'm good with my own little children and focus on that? What's going to happen? Well, one day we're going to wake up and realize, wait a minute. I've been so focused on my little children. We've been told to focus on little children. This is really not a good podcast, to be honest.